My name is Lee Langlois. I am working with Retain Adjust Nebraska. We are the campaign to stop the return of the death penalty to our state. We repealed it last year with a bipartisan majority, 16 Republicans, 13 Democrats, and 1 independent over the governor's veto, and replaced it with life without parole. Part of the reason that we did that is the fact that there's always that risk of executing an innocent person. And in Nebraska, the very first person ever executed was actually an innocent person. It was back in the 1800s. It was a long time ago, but a man went missing. One of his friends was accused of committing the crime. They convicted him, hanged him, and a few years later, the guy he supposedly murdered comes wandering back into town. More recently, there's the Beatrice 6, which has recently gotten back in the news, which was about 20 some odd years ago in a town about an hour south of Lincoln called Beatrice. There was this horrible crime where this woman in her 60s was murdered in her home, and these 6 people were rounded up by the police. They were detained and denied food and water for days. They told them, if you don't confess, you guys are going to get the electric chair. And 5 of those 6 did confess. Their stories didn't match up, they didn't make any sense, but they were so afraid of being put to death, they confessed to a crime they didn't commit. The one that did not confess spent the next 20 years trying to prove his innocence. Eventually he was able to demand and get testing of DNA evidence, which proved someone completely different had done it. Someone who had been convicted of a very similar crime in Oklahoma and had since died in prison. And after a collective 77 years in prison for something they didn't do, these people were freed. And they recently won a civil rights lawsuit against the county and the prosecutors that awarded them collectively over $25 million. And that's just one story. But we know that the justice system isn't perfect. It makes mistakes. And we can't give those people their time back. We can at least let them out. We can try to compensate them, but we can't un-execute somebody. We can't fix that and just say, oops, sorry, to their families, or the victims even, who thought that they'd gotten justice, but turned out they'd been after the wrong person all the time. And there's so many other different reasons. The cost, the fact that this state hasn't been able to carry one out in almost 20 years, it just doesn't work. It doesn't. There's nothing to suggest it deters any crimes. It just hurts people and goes on and on and on, and leaves open that chance that we commit that worst crime, which is executing an innocent person for something they didn't do. And so we're going to be voting on that again, thanks to our governor, because he's a very wealthy man. He was able to pay people to go around collecting signatures to put it on the ballots. We're going to have to vote again on November 8th to vote retain to stop the return of the death penalty and keep the smart alternative of life without parole.